Hey everybody, Pete here from Northern Works. This week I'm going to try something completely new and do an epoxy pour to make some furniture. And I'm actually pretty nervous about how it's going to go, so let's find out. I've been working on this project with an old pine Christmas tree stump, and I've spent the last few weeks chiseling off all of the bark and cutting it down to size, and I'd left it to dry for a little while, and disaster struck. These huge cracks and voids just appeared everywhere, and I thought, well, here's a great opportunity to try out epoxy and fill some of these gaps and turn it into something usable. Okay, I think I've got everything I'm going to need for this. I've obviously got my epoxy, it's just from Amazon. I don't even know if it's the right stuff. I've got some dye so that I can make it black. I've got some packing tape so that the workpiece doesn't stick to the wood. I've got some hot glue and a hot glue gun to make the moulds. I've obviously got some snazzy gloves, a big bucket to mix everything up in, and a piece of melamine board, just furniture board from the DIY shop, that's going to stop the wood from sticking to it. And of course, I've got my workpiece as well. So I'm going to prep the board, make sure everything's non-stick, and I think we just have to get on with it. Right, the first thing I need to do is to prep my melamine board with a layer of this packing tape. The resin shouldn't stick to this tape, so in theory it'll create another layer that will make everything easy to peel off afterwards. In theory. Right, I didn't want to have to build a whole form out of melamine for this because the round edges are it's not even a circle. So I'm going to try something just by taping up the gaps. Wherever there's a crack on the edge, I'll just tape that over, and that should keep all of the resin inside the material, and it hopefully won't spread out everywhere, but this could get really messy. I'm working on the principle that taking a bit of extra care and time and the prep is what's going to make the difference between success and failure here. So I don't mind taking a bit longer and adding a few more layers of tape if that means that the end result is going to be a really nice piece. My last step before I actually pour the epoxy is to put a bead of hot glue all the way around the bottom, and I might do a second bead as well just to catch any overspill, and hopefully that'll be enough to stop the epoxy from just pouring away. Right, I've been putting this off for long enough. It's time to mix up this resin and get it poured in. Whoa, hang on. Depending on your epoxy, you might not actually need to wear a mask, but I've got such a small workspace that I thought I'd rather not take the risk.
Okay, it's time to add the dye. The only thing left to do is pour. Fingers crossed.
Definitely smell it now. Pretty pleased with that for a first epoxy pour. We've gone through and popped as many bubbles as we can, but more keep coming up, and we'll come back every 15 minutes or so and just pop as many as we can. There's maybe a few holes that I probably just need to keep an eye on and top up a little bit, but pretty happy with that. All that's left to do is leave it overnight let it set, and then come back and see how it's looking. So it's a couple of days since I poured the epoxy. I came in after about 6 hours and topped up the gaps where the resin had gone down into some voids into the wood, but it looks like it's filled up all those cracks really nicely now. I need to take off the excess and then we can get it ready for finish. I'm trying to take off as much as I can with the plane so that there's a lot less to try and take off with the sander. Right, I've been going at this stool top for a while now with the orbital sander, and there's still quite a lot of black epoxy in the raised grain of this pine, and that's not even before we get started on the backside, the underside, which has got this really thick layer of epoxy to get through. I've been at this with the orbital, I've tried hand sanding, I've even been at it with the hand plane, and I just don't want to spend the next 10 hours tearing through this, so time to try something new. I got myself an electric plane. This one's pretty cheap from Screwfix, and we'll see how it does. That's so much better. So I've got the stool top to where I want it to be now. It's looking pretty clean and I've got rid of all the high spots. I ended up throwing away the original sandpaper for my orbital sander and replacing it with something a bit better, and that definitely made a huge difference. But I have still got quite a bit of staining from the black epoxy in the grain of the wood. I could have avoided that by sealing the wood with something before I poured the epoxy. That's a lesson for next time. Now I'm going to go round the edge with a chisel and just clean up all of these edges, take off the additional bark, so that I can come back, route a chamfer into the bottom and a round over into the top. And then I can sand everything up to its final grits and get it ready for finish. Well, you can get down now actually. Alright, so I've put the round over on, I've put the chamfer in the bottom, and I've sanded this now all the way up to 320 grit. And I've cut these mortises into the top because this old bit of pine is actually going to become the seat of a pretty nice ash stool. Right, time for finish. This is going to be so nice. Right, to finish this thing off, I'm going to use a hard wax oil. This one is from Osmo. I've never used Osmo before or any other hard wax, but from what I've seen, I'm going to use a brush to put on the first coat and then leave it for about 15 minutes to sink into the wood and come back and wipe off some of the excess with a rag, and that should help it cure a little bit faster. While I'm waiting before I buff this out, I guess there's two questions that have come to mind throughout this whole project. Was it as scary as I thought it was going to be? And would I do it again? On the first question, no, it definitely wasn't as scary as I expected it to be. Honestly, I thought I was going to come in here in the morning and find floods of epoxy all over the floor and just like no way to clean it up. But I think there's so much information on YouTube now about how to get your preparation right that if you follow it, you get a really good outcome pretty much first time. And epoxy was a lot easier to work with than I expected, although that does sort of answer question number 2 as well. I'm really pleased with the results of this experiment, but honestly, the amount of prep time and faff and cleaning up and the time it takes just to work the epoxy in a different way, it's just not how I want to spend my time when I'm woodworking. Like I said, I'm really happy with the results, and I do really enjoy seeing other people's projects, but I don't think you're going to see multicoloured river tables on this channel anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed this experiment, and if you found it helpful at all, give it a like and help some other folks find it. Now, I'm going to leave this to dry, and then I can get it all assembled with the legs, but you'll have to wait until the next episode for that. See you then.